New York Farm Bureau has been working alongside the New York State Humane Association on an important piece of legislation. Providing proper care for animals is a goal of every responsible farmer. Healthy, well-cared for animals are essential for providing nutritious food for our customers. Customers value where their food comes from, and so do we. This is why we are in support of Bill Assembly 7207 and Senate Bill 5320, sponsored by Senate Agricultural Chair Patty Ritchie and Assemblyman Ag Chair Bill McGee, who is with us today. Quick update, the bill did move out of the Assembly Government Operations Committee yesterday. It is now sitting in Ways and Means. Regardless if we are talking about farm animals or family pets, no animal should be the target of cruel or inhumane abuse. The goal with this legislation is to clear up any confusion that may exist about animal cruelty laws and provide law enforcement with the appropriate tools necessary to prosecute abusers to the fullest extent of the law. The legislation would allow for New York State Department of Agricultural and Markets and the Division of Criminal Justice Services to coordinate and develop training programs for law enforcement and district attorneys across New York. In addition, they would provide educational material that can be shared both in print and electronically. The goal here is to help our police officers, sheriff's investigators, and prosecutors with their duties. They help keep our community safe, and that extends to our animals as well. I would like to introduce Sue McDonough from the New York State Humane Association. Sue is also a retired state trooper, and she's been working with us on this important legislation. Sue?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Assemblyman McGee and Senator Ritchie for sponsoring this legislation. This bill would assure that materials and resources needed to bring animal cruelty crimes to a successful conclusion are available to all police and district attorneys. In New York State, it is the police who are mandated to enforce the laws which pertain to animal cruelty, which are under Article 26 of the Agriculture and Market Law. But unfortunately, the police don't always receive adequate training in this law. Over the past 15 years, the New York State Humane Association has been conducting anti-cruelty workshops. However, there are over 60,000 police officers in New York State, and we are unable to reach them all. And this legislation would reach the police officers and give them the tools that they need. As a retired state trooper, I believe that training policies that are developed by the Department of Agriculture and Markets, the Division of Criminal Justice Services, and the Municipal Police Council, all working together, will result in all officers having the tools and resources needed to effectively handle these crimes. Animal cruelty is a bridge crime. It leads to other crimes. Personally, in investigating these crimes, I have actually seen hoarder cases lead to child abuse and elder abuse. I have seen cases that pertain to animal fighting lead to gun trafficking and drug trafficking. I think it's very important and a necessary step that we all work together on this issue. Thank you very much.
Yep. No. You can have your papers. That's okay. Next, I'd like to introduce Assemblyman Bill McGee. Bill is the chair of our Assembly Agriculture Committee and the sponsor of the legislation in the Assembly. Bill?
Thank you, Dean. Good morning, and thank all of you for coming as we present this, what I think is an outstanding bill that addresses a lot of issues we have with cruelty of animals and how it's handled. I want to thank the New York State Humane Society and Albany County Sheriff Craig Apple for their tireless work on behalf of animals. I also recognize Senator Ritchie for sponsoring the bill in the Senate And as chair of the Assembly Agriculture Committee, my focus is on addressing the issues facing New York's farms and strengthening our agricultural industry. But it also gives me an opportunity to advocate on animal welfare issues. Over the years, I'm happy to have helped pass a number of bills that ensure the safety of animals while providing for the fair treatment of farmers. Unfortunately, the investigation of animal abuse and neglect has become a necessary part of the job of our local officials. This legislation will help ensure that enforcement has the tools and resources needed to combat these horrific crimes. By bringing together the State Department of Agriculture and Markets and law enforcement agencies, this bill allows for proper training in animal cruelty laws, requires the state to make information about these laws available to local law enforcement prosecutors, and will create new training programs to ensure local officials are given proper guidance. The legislation makes it possible to leverage the expertise we have at the Department of Agriculture and Markets by connecting them with the men and women who are on the ground working to make sure our animals are kept safe. Thank you for coming, and I look forward to the passage of this bill in the very near future.
As Assemblyman McGee mentioned, this bill is also being sponsored in the Senate by Assembly Agricultural Chair Senator Patty Ritchie. She wanted to be here today, but her schedule did not allow that. But we want to thank her for sponsoring this legislation in the Senate chamber. Finally, I'd like to introduce Albany County Sheriff Craig Apple. He understands the importance of training his officers and about animal cruelty laws, and he is one of those folks that's on the front lines, as Assemblyman McGee said, dealing with these issues. Sheriff.
Good morning. Thank you, first of all. I'm not a big fan of a lot of new legislation. Sometimes I think there's too many laws out there, but this falls in that category of the no-brainers. As a sheriff, we see, a lot of animal abuse, some intentional, some unintentional. And the problem that you have is when you're trying to leverage a law, how does it fit? And they don't know. And how that comes about is a quick story. Last week, we got a call, a couple of horses. A family member called one of my deputies, said there's a couple horses, you need to look at them. I think they're starving to death. Deputy comes into work, he goes up and he checks on the horses. He says, yes, they're emaciated, what do I do about it? So he goes down, talks to his sergeant calls down to headquarters, because everybody knew they were emaciated, but now what are we gonna do about it to get the horses back on a healthy track? So fortunately, we run a county animal response team as a result of Hurricane Sandy and Irene. So we were in contact with veterinarians, but it all boils down to, we know there are laws out there that we can utilize, based on culpability, but how do you apply those laws? When do those laws come into play? So the resources I can't stress enough how important it is, whether it's a training class, whether it's a handout, it's needed. There's a lot of convoluted laws out there regarding animal abuse between agricultural and penal, and they don't know how to apply them. So I would encourage the passage of this. I would love to see this become a training block into our police academy and also have a handout. I know there are apps out there that some district attorneys use, but again, if we don't know how to apply them to the case in particular, it's not doing us much good. So thank you for bringing this forward, and I would really strongly encourage the passage of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Apple. Appreciate Sue for being here, Sheriff Apple and Assemblyman McGee, thank you. Now we'll open up if there's any questions.
The estimated financial impact of something like this?
We're still working on that, quite honestly. I know what we really want to do now is, get this law on the books, and then if we get passage and get the governor to sign it, then we work with, Tax and Finance and Office of Budget and the governor next year to put some funding together in the budget.
Sure. And this is moved to the Ways and Means Committee in the Assembly, you said?
It's in the Ways and Means in the Assembly, correct.
Where is it in the Senate?
Currently, it's sitting in Investigations Committee in the Senate.
Is this something that's just been slow-moving, or has it hit a snag in either house that has held it up? Or?
I don't think it's slow moving. I think it's an idea that's been out there for a while. The opportunity was actually this year, as with any legislation, take the opportunities when they happen. Senator McGee and Senator Ritchie found an opportunity to move this in their respective houses, and we have done that. So now it's near the end of session, so we're trying to get some leverage and get it passed.
Sheriff, how often does your department handle cases like this where you have intentionally or unintentionally?
Unfortunately, far too frequently. Again, we have a very wide patrol area. Sometimes we're in the inner city or a suburban area or in a very rural area, and it really doesn't matter. It happens just as much in inner city as it does in a rural area. We do come across it quite often, whether it is a hoarding situation. That, unfortunately, we seems to be much more prevalent than actual animal abuse. But again, how do you deal with that? And some of it, again, is intentional, some is unintentional, but nonetheless, animals shouldn't be treated that way. So it's important to get the resources out to our law enforcement. I would love to see, Department of Criminal Justice Services put together a program where they can come into the academy and take 4 hours or 6 hour block and talk to them and then give them a handout where they could have, we have so many different booklets for so many different things, whether it's elder abuse or whether it's power outages, whatever the case may be. This is something that a lot of our law enforcement is going to deal with a lot more than, unfortunately, some of the other crimes and classes that they learn from.
And does this bill set up a mechanism for something like that where they come into the police academy, or is this for different types of training programs?
I think this is a resource.
It's a resource issue, making the resources available, and then, working with Ag and Markets and the Department of Justice Services to put their program together. So, we want to make it available. We want to get the program established, then, as you asked earlier, funding, we'll get the funding in the next budget cycle and let Ag and Markets and Department of Justice Services put the curriculum together. So, yes, ma'am.
I covered this a few weeks back. I'm wondering if this legislation is related to, there was a push, I believe, to move the animal cruelty laws from Ag and Markets to the penal code.
Mhm.
Is that?
So this law is, totally different than the penal law. I understand what they're trying to do, but this is really about educating our law enforcement officials and district attorneys about the laws that are already in the books. The laws are already there at Ag and Markets law, so they're there already. So it's about educating them and making resources available, as Sheriff said. So when the folks are in the patrol car or they're at the sergeant's desk, they know it's there. They can look and say, all right, this is the law, and follow the appropriate steps as that goes.
Is that the issue though? Because there were advocates that I was talking to, they were saying that officers are typically not trained as much in Ag and Markets as they are with the penal system.
Well, I'd have to defer to the sheriff for that because I don't do any academy training, so.
Listen, I support that as well. I really do. And that is an issue, and I apologize. I got to chew a cough drop or I'd be coughing all over everyone. That is one of the other issues, and that's why we need these resources, because where do you find these laws? Most cops are trained to look at the penal law or the V&T, go through it. Wow, this doesn't fit animal abuse. This isn't there. And that's where, even with Buster's Law, which comes up, unfortunately, far too often as well, people look at it and go, well, this doesn't really fit a felony. We need to have the proper training and the proper education. In order to do that, we need the proper resources made available to us. But that is an issue. That's, I guess, a side issue. But I think that would really help kind of streamline things. And I think you would also see a rise in a lot of the arrests or the summons issued regarding animal cruelty if they could find and if they knew how to apply.
Next.
Also wondering if you can talk about, I think a lot of times when people think of animal abuse, they think of, domestic dogs, cats, but can you talk about the issue with farm animals?
So, I'm not going to stand up here and say we're perfect. We have, our bad apples, and absolutely, we don't believe in animal cruelty at all. But what I think this legislation will allow is those experts at Ag and Markets to be on call, to be available for, folks like Sheriff Apple or the state troopers to, be there if there's a report of abuse and actually know, is this abuse? I'm not going to shy away. We've had our, issues. But also there have been issues that have been highlighted in the past that when, a state vet got involved with law enforcement, they actually, looked at it as like, this is more of a propaganda issue for some of those animal rights organizations than an animal abuse issue. So.
We covered a case a few weeks, I think it was a few weeks back, I think in Glenville, where there was a man who actually went to court for abusing his horses, and there was farmers rallying around him. Do you see that, like maybe that's an issue that?
I would suggest that this law could maybe help in that situation, because there seems to have been some lack of clarity on what actually was going on. What the vet was there, felt good with the way the horses were treated. Then you go to someone else and no. So I think the legislation that we're proposing today will hopefully clarify some of those issues and make it a lot clearer and not quite as foggy as that issue seems to have been. Anyone else? Going once? What's that? Twice? 3 times sold? All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.